Hi, everyone. I am Lorianne. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I am with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas, and we would like to welcome you to our Lift Your Story podcast.
So on this episode, we have Cammy Wang, and this is going to be interesting because I am going to introduce her as a Trifecta Coach, and we're going to find out why that is. Thank you for being here, Cammy.
Thank you so much, Lorianne and Roy. I'm so delighted to be here. And I've actually watched several of your podcast interviews. I'm so intrigued and so amazed at what you do. And I'm just really honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so you're a Trifecta coach. Now, this has nothing to do with horse racing, right?
No, at least I like watching horses race.
Okay, can you elaborate on that for us?
Well, you know what? It's kind of an interesting term because most people don't even know what that even means, other than the prefix try, right, for three. But I coach in three specific areas because of based on my academic and career backgrounds, which I'm going to go into. I'm an education, a career, and a financial coach. Okay. So, a lot of times when I would go to networking events or when people ask me, who do we refer to you? Like, who are your audience? I said, pretty much anybody. Because who doesn't have a kid who doesn't want to go to college? Who doesn't need to look for a job? Who doesn't need any financial planning in their household or for their business? So pretty much it's a wide open space. And I'm just grateful that I'm being able to actually provide that type of service for a wide range of people out there.
Now, you're also an attorney, is that correct?
I am. That was one of my first careers because I've had several career changes, which is why I'm a career planner. I've worked in many industries and many different types of professions. But yeah, I went to college in good old Los Angeles, California. I went to University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. I'm a Bruin. And I graduated with a communications degree and had it in my mind that if I didn't get into law school, I would go to either broadcasting, like become a news anchor, or also in public relations and work for entertainment. Those are all my different paths. But I did get into law school in Loyola in downtown Los Angeles. And by the time I think I was in my last year of law school, I already thought I'm going to be a trial attorney. And one day I'm going to sit on the bench and really make a big difference there. So I already had planned out my life at 20 years old, if you can even believe that. And well, you know what? I have learned in life's paths that you can never predict what happens. And so I finished law school. I took the California State Bar and I started practicing, but it was not in trial courts. It was not as a prosecutor. I was actually in, if you can believe this, construction defect.
Oh, I know all about that. I was in the construction industry and we had a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of stuff. And I think the only reason why I actually joined, besides getting the offer after law school, was because I grew up in my parents' business. My father ran a construction company. And so my younger brother and we grew up in this small little business, watching him, design and create commercial and residential properties, condos, townhomes, motels here and there. So I knew the business and understood it, but, leading up to later on when I probably will talk about why I'm in the world of financial planning is because, as a business owner, my mom and dad worked 7 days a week and everything they made went into the business. And I also realized they were always in a lot of lawsuits. You probably understand Roy very well.
I do.
Right? There are liens that are actually filed from subcontractors, and there are also from my father was a general contractor, and then there's also the owners who sue you if you don't make your timelines or your benchmarks. So I just thought, wow, this is a hard business, at least the way they made it seem like it was hard. So I was thinking, well, if I am not on the trial attorney's path yet, at least maybe I can make it a family business where I can protect my mom and dad from any more future lawsuits. So, so yeah, I did go into construction defect practice for a short while, but by the time I was just in my first year of practicing law, I just realized this wasn't my thing, my niche. I know I was always good at communicating and advocating, but this wasn't the type of practice I was looking at least professionally and personally. So a good friend of mine at the time, still in law school, he just said, why don't you become a teacher? And I said, well, I've been teaching my peers all my life, right? But as a profession? And he says, well, why not? I mean, you've got a lot of that up here in your brain, but why don't you share it with the world? And I thought, I didn't go to law school for a teaching background. And he says, well, what else do you want to do? And I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. I mean, back then I had a lot of ego and a lot of hyper ambition. So it's a little different. This is over 30 years ago. So I stepped into the classroom, a very small classroom, as an ESL teacher for an after school program. And my life and world changed from then. It was a complete life pivot, and it actually started my path to becoming an educator, which I still am to this day. And this was 30 years ago. I'm actually very grateful when I think back that even though I started off initially on the law path, I actually have become a lifelong educator. And from then on have served in schools, colleges, universities, governments, and nonprofits to be able to educate people from all backgrounds and all ages. And it's been a blessing, and it's also been something that has led me to become a coach eventually. Because when you're a teacher and you're also a counselor in schools and universities, you're working with people from all backgrounds, of course. And after a while, I just thought, I've been in education for so long, I want to go out into the community now and really share my knowledge and experiences out in the world. And so that's why I became a coach now as a private coach. And I'm offering a lot of the inside knowledge that I've learned in all these different industries I've been in. That's why I'm a career coach, college admissions, educational planning, and then eventually I can later on talk about how I got into financial planning as well.
So you were talking about, when you were young, you had all this, you had your plan, you knew what you were going to do. So you graduate from law school, and then you decide, this isn't really for me. And you went down, I don't mean this, you went not down, but you went to teaching. And so it sounds like it might have been a little step back at first from being an attorney to being a teacher. But in that transition, you found your passion. Would that be fair?
That is absolutely fair. And, I remember being interviewed on a different podcast. That one was based on health and wellness. Well, I always want to share, because it is part of my story, that a really large reason why I had to also leave the law practice was because of my health. Because in my second year in law school, I developed what I call a lifelong disability. And it actually was so painful that by the time I was even trying to get into third year, I wasn't even sure I was going to finish. So it actually is like, when I look back so many decades ago, I only think of how much it's like boot camp in law school, going through it, but not just like all the other students going through it. I had to deal with a very severe disability that I didn't even know if I could even take the bar exam, even if I graduated from law school. But I did. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to take that bar exam in California, which is 3 days long, if I don't pass it the first time, I am not ever going to take it again. But I did pass, and I was amazed and grateful at the same time, because it was physically actually excruciating because my disability is so debilitating. I couldn't actually like move my hands and my fingers and a lot of my neck and shoulders. And so even though I was practicing in that construction defect firm for that short time period, my condition actually worsened. And to the point that I actually had to leave and go on a medical sabbatical. And because of that, it's how, you know, like I said, life has a lot of things in store for you that you're not even like aware of. It was because of my health and the stress and anxiety of being in the law practice that turned me towards my life passion, which is to become an educator and a coach.
Here's interesting fact though too, is that it's one thing when you have, we were talking about this the other day, if you have any sort of disabilities or chronic pain or anything, and if you're under stress, it's going to just elevate it. So it's not necessarily that you're dysfunctional on it, but you do need to have a job or a career or whatever. That's not going to stress you beyond, just because it will come back. I mean, I've had one since I was 22 and it was bad then, but it's better now. But I notice when the stress factor goes up and it will start to, you know, inflame or whatever the thing is there. The other fact I just wanted to bring up very clearly too, is that I know when Roy was saying that, and he meant it in no disrespect, going from lawyer capacity to a teacher. But I think what that taught you, and I think this is a really good message out there, is that the amount of, I don't know, how's the word? I know my sister was a teacher, says what you get out of teaching is so different than what you get out of law. And they're both very important. And it's just in our society, we put them in different levels, but it's definitely not the case.
It's that personal fulfillment that you're making a difference, right?
Yes. You're absolutely right. And, you know, actually, I have never regretted, even though in the very first maybe 10 years, because of the disability and not knowing if I could ever really perform at any level that I could. Even teaching was initially difficult because I couldn't do things like lift a book or a piece of paper. That's how severe my disability was.
Wow, and you were able to work?
I know, right? But the thing is,
Can you
I was
share just what your disability was?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have a combination of fibromyalgia with severe tendonitis.
Okay.
And it took over 2.5 years for someone to finally diagnose me after seeing pretty much like almost 100 doctors and healers on the eastern and western side. No one at that time really knew. It wasn't until I saw a neurologist who did an MRI and said, no, this is not nerve damage, but you should see my colleague who's a rheumatologist, and maybe he might figure out what's going on. And that was also a blessing because he ended up being both a physician and a lawyer. He did both. and he was such a delightful man himself. But he finally said that I had something called the diagnosis of last resort, because he ruled out all the autoimmune diseases. And he said that, well, this is something newer that most people don't know about. This is like 30 plus years ago. It's called fibromyalgia, and it's not something that's curable, but at the same time, you can live with it. You just got to learn how to do things differently for the rest of your life. And right now it's at most severe, but eventually it'll get better. And one of the first things you need to do is you actually have to work out. The sweat will actually overcome the pain. And I looked at it and I thought, are you serious? Because I can't even open a door right now. So you got to work over the pain, because the more you can build up the endurance physically, the more you can overcome the actual symptoms of this particular condition. And he was right. It did take a time to, because I wasn't really a very physically exercising type of person as well. So let me tell you, from the transition from law to education and then the health part, it was a complete, I call, transformation in my life, because it's, you know, when you said earlier and what you reinforced, Lorianne, our society looks at these positions in life like you're higher than this person and you're higher than that. And the funny thing is, I've never really, only in the beginning when I went from law to education, I would even get an interview. It's like, well, why did you go from being a lawyer to a teacher? It was like some kind of like, I don't know, like a bane on my existence. And I said,
what were you thinking?
and I would always justify it. Back then it was more for me to justify to myself, well, there's nothing wrong with being a teacher. Do you know how noble of a profession that is?
Exactly.
But it's society's ranking of titles, and I have found over many, many years that I've got 3 titles and degrees from multiple. I also, the thing about going into education is after a few years of teaching, I loved it so much, but I wanted to combine the law degree with an education degree. And so, using my career planning skills again, I actually started looking at all these grad programs out there that would hopefully give me, I guess, the best practices out there. And so I ended up going to the East Coast, which is what I always wanted to do anyways, just to kind of see what it's like. I've been a West Coast California my whole life. But I went to the East Coast, I went to Harvard, and I got my master's. Yeah, I got my master's in education, focusing on
Wow.
Yeah, I focused on policy and administration because my goal was to work in DC. I used to call it my Wizard of Oz. I was Dorothy looking for, the key to social justice and equity. That's what I always thought DC would be like. So when I finished my grad program at Harvard, I went straight to DC. I literally pounded the pavement up and down the National Mall, looking for any federal government agency that would take me. But I was fortunate, right timing, right place. It did take me several months, but I ended up in a position in the U.S. Department of Education as a policy analyst for special education. And that was a way for me to combine my law and education background, because even to this day, I'm still a civil rights attorney. And this gave me a specialized area in the law, which is civil rights focusing on disability law. And that to me, of course, makes sense because of what I understand personally of having a lifelong disability. So, I am a lifelong, I guess, degree collector.
I love that. You never can stop. I just want to say something really quickly though, because when you were saying about your disabilities and not picking things up, when I lived in the States, my son was born there, and I just want to do this really quickly, but I had this where I could not move my joints, my neck, and they did all sorts of studies, nothing, and it only happened for 2 weeks for me, thank goodness, but they thought it was lupus, and lupus is very closely, they're different, but that pain, that muscle, and I have a friend who's got, and I thought, unless you experience it, and thank God it was only for 2 weeks. They put me on anti-inflammatories, but it was horrible. I couldn't move in my bed. It was so painful. And I had to go down the stairs on my butt because I couldn't walk down the stairs.
Been there, done that.
I can, like I said, I'm very lucky that it wasn't, but I have that empathy for the people that have to do that and live with that their whole life. It's not nice. So congratulations for getting through it. And I do know that fibromyalgia, my sister has it too. There is a way to lessen it, but it is a lifetime thing. Yes.
It is. Yeah. And, but it humbles me. I think going to law school, changing my career, living with the lifelong disability, it made me go from ego to, like I said earlier, to having the humility to not only just change my literally societal position, but also my perspective of life. And so going into education was what I always thought as, like I said earlier, the noble profession, right? It may not pay much, but it sure gives a sense of cause and, a sense of giving to the world. And so, yeah, I worked in the Department of Ed But, my whole story is about how I have to constantly deal with health issues, because on top of that, then, while I was working in DC, I developed a tumor, and that came out of nowhere. So, and that on top of having fibromyalgia, you could just only imagine I'm limping around all of DC streets trying to get to the department, coming out of the metro, going up the escalators, and I'm dragging my right leg because I couldn't even move it anymore. And it took several months before any physician could figure out what I had. But eventually, from another MRI I've done, they found out I had a tumor. And so this is why it was actually pushing down on my hip, which is why I couldn't really walk anymore. So that was the second mark in my career, because I had surgery there and it took a very long time to recover. And by that time, I was just wishing I was back home again in California, just to go through a full recovery. So I was, again, briefly in the federal government and then I came back home again. And so it was from that moment on that I stepped into the college and university realm. And, I had the experience from working in the federal department, working in law firm. And so now let's see if I can actually reach students, because that's what I ultimately want to do, with the understanding that everyone has different backgrounds and different experiences. But I want to be able to constantly, as a counselor, share my understanding of them by actually being relational or empathetic with my experiences. So 25 plus years later, I have worked in schools and colleges and universities, public and private, as both teacher, faculty, as well as academic and career counselor. And eventually, the last 10 years, I was a director for different student programs. And I would say hundreds and thousands of students later, it's one of those things you go, wow, have I really impacted that many people? I don't know, but sometimes they reach out through Facebook or LinkedIn and they go, hey, Ms. Wang, do you remember me? And like, oh my gosh, I'm like class of 1990 something. I go, oh, right, yes. But they say, look at what I've done, and I am always so proud of them. So yes, it's these stories along the way marked with different health issues that I've developed that actually constantly progresses me towards another part of my life, another career, another cause. So you might be wondering, Lorianne and Roy, how did I get into financial planning?
I was just going to ask you, okay, let's talk about your other career.
Well, it all builds together. And this goes back to when I brought up about my parents and their construction business. It also goes back at looking at our school system. I think we did a recent interview, Roy, talking about, a lot of things that need more reform or improvements in our school system.
Definitely.
And being from the school system, I do agree. And this is why I stepped out of it about 5 years ago. Because one of the things we don't provide, which there's a list of things we don't really provide in our schools. And again, this is not to offend any of my colleagues who are teachers and principals and staff and faculty.
It's just a fact. It's just a fact.
It is, and we can only do so much. But, I started realizing, watching my parents in their own small business, that, unfortunately, they did have to file bankruptcy and close their business 25 years later, because, no matter how much I respect and love my father, there was just the lack of understanding of how to handle finances, personal and business, and not also having these types of classes in school we call financial literacy.
Exactly.
Especially not over 30, 40 years ago, right? You mentioned earlier in another interview, like things like basic skills, like cooking and nutrition and how to fix a car and how to like do household chores. Or in my case also, like many people don't even know what a checkbook is anymore. So things like that, I noticed as a teacher, we are still doing a grave disservice in not providing basic financial skills to our students. And so what I see in my current practice of coaching is that when I'm working with families or individuals, business owners, I see this tremendous hole that's been carrying with them since childhood. And the thing is, I've always wanted to provide the financial education to the public. But when I'm working in school and university, we're concentrating on the academics. And it's not like, sure, I'll teach you nutrition and health and financial skills. They want you to go find out on yourself. And even in the school systems, they say, well, just learn from your parents, right? But if your parents and their parents generationally never got that information themselves, how would they? And so there's this constant struggle of how do you find this information? And when I was a director in student programming, I would have hundreds of students who would constantly ask me, what does my financial aid package mean? Do I just like get all this free money and I just graduate? And I say, half of it or more of it is actually student loans, actually, if you want to really be specific, and you're going to have to pay it all back one day. And so that's why we have seen in our country that student loan debt is the second highest debt right below mortgages. There's $1.6 trillion of student loan debt as of the end of this summer. At the end of this year, $1.6 trillion in student loan debt. And so I just thought, okay, if I keep staying in the school university systems, I'm not going to be able to teach what I really want to teach and coach individuals, families, and businesses, because I am in a system where they kind of don't always promote entrepreneurism or individuality or seeking what you want to do in life versus what you have to do in your major. So I said, I gotta venture out into the world now and not only just provide the knowledge and experiences from my past and all the industries I've been in, but now I really need to educate the public on areas of financial literacy, because it is, I call it a disease in this country. We just don't have the ability to cope with it. And when we look at the retirement crisis that I see so many of my pre and about to retire clients out there, I just feel like I feel so bad for people because, you know, I think of the many, many families, including my own parents, that needed to rely on me, for instance, as their retirement plan. As a matter of fact, I figured that out when I was in high school. I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, if they don't save, right, if they don't save money for themselves, who's going to take care of them when they're older? And I thought, oh, wait, I'm the oldest daughter. There's a reason why they save money only to have me go to college or maybe later on to graduate school. I think I'm their retirement plan. So, and it's true. As a matter of fact, I am the one supporting my parents. But I spent most of my life not knowing even how to do that for them, because I couldn't even figure out how to retire myself. Like, what am I supposed to do in order to be able to be financially at least okay by the time I retire? But then I have to also take care of my parents. And that just, I mean, Lorianne and Roy, I used to just wake up at nights like just cold sweat because I just did not know what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so this is the part where I go, this is my mission, my crusade as part of being with my company. I'm a marketing director with World Financial Group. We are the ones who literally go out there and educate the public for free, by the way, to be able to empower people with not only this knowledge, but also the tools and resources they can use in order to, let's say, even embrace and achieve their goals and dreams. Now, who doesn't want to do that in their life, right?
Exactly. Now, you were saying that parents, you know, there's a lot of parents that don't know, but there are also a lot of parents that do know, but they don't sit you down and teach. Because I look at my parents and what they've done, they're wonderful. My mother knew how to save, but she never sat down. All she did was, when I was telling Roy this, I'd get an allowance and I'd want to buy her a gift, and she'd just get mad at me. Instead of sitting me down saying, here, you know what, here's what we can do. Why don't you here take 5 cents to buy me something, this much put in a bank, and it goes on like that. Don't want to take up too much time, but I really do believe that not all parents can even talk to their kids about it because kids really don't want to hear it. They will listen to a teacher, and it should start earlier on. I agree with Roy. It's not an academic thing. It is totally an academic thing, because if you want your business to run properly, you better know your finances and your life in general. I think I was better with business than my personal life, I have to admit. My personal finances, my business finances, I was a lot smarter with than my personal, but anyway.
One of my sons took a class in high school. I think it was like home and family living or something along those lines. Okay. So they paired up a boy and a girl. So, okay, you guys are married, and they had a list of careers they could pick from. You know, well, I want to be a teacher. I want to be a whatever. They had to pick a career. And then they had to go out. They had to get an apartment. I mean, this is all on paper. Get an apartment, buy a car, and all this stuff. And basically budget. And so now you got to remember, my son's driving. He's 16, and when you're 16, the insurance is like twice as much as for us. He goes, Dad, do you have any idea how much insurance costs? I go, as a matter of fact, I do. Yes. but he did learn a lot in that class.
That should be for everyone.
There should be.
Absolutely. We really appreciate you being here. Honestly, as Cammy, this was, these topics are always really telling. And I'm glad that you said it out there that, the fibromyalgia, there's not a lot of people understand it. Absolute. And again, sort of associated, but not either lupus, but just, those are very difficult things. So congratulations on getting through that. And how can our listeners find you?
Well, there's so many ways. And
Oh, that's cute.
Just and just to finish off, what I have been doing. I mean, coaching is one way profitable, but the other thing is I go out into the community and I teach free financial literacy and free college admission seminars, and I've been doing this for the last 3 years. And because of that, this is my way of giving back to the schools, to the churches, to community organizations out there, without the actual, well, you need to pay me for this. Because again, like you said, Lorianne, earlier, not everyone understands money and not everyone has money, especially during this time period of the pandemic. People are struggling financially. And so I've been able to just go out and provide parents, families, community leaders, anyone, and students, especially students. Like I've been teaching a lot of these classes for free, especially like through PTSAs in schools, at middle schools and high schools, where they can really start to, lay that foundation so that hopefully maybe if they go on to college, this might carry on with them and give them that sort of, give them at least a little bit more than they ever got in the past, right? So with that being said, yes, I am making it like my mission in life to go from regionally to now globally. And so with the 3 years that I have been teaching in the community, I've been able to now I'm going to create a series of online classes to put on the webs, whether it's through YouTube or even my own classes. So now I could educate the public globally. Right. So how people get a hold of me? Well, I have my company website, which is www.wfgconnects.com/Cammy Wang. I also am on LinkedIn. I have 2 profiles, still same me. It's either Cammy Wang or Camellia Wang. That's my formal name. You can find me in 2 places on LinkedIn. You can find me as Cammy Wang on Facebook. And then my actual email for my business is cammywang, which is cammywang.wfg@gmail.com. Okay, cool. And, please reach out to me, because actually all of my financial counseling is free. So why not take advantage of that, right? And I'll also send people a free PDF guide on 6 financial strategies to get people started in their personal finances.
Great.
Beautiful.
Lorianne, did you want to tell her about Lyft?
Yeah, so we're going to just end this up by saying this. When we say lift your story, we mean that you're going to be on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. That is the lift from our book, Makeup Not Required, How to Brand the True You. And Roy and I are both part of that book. And we just found it easy. If you're gonna send the message out there, just lift your message. And that's what we do for you. So thank you so much for being here. Really enjoyed having you, like I said. So
it was
Oh,
a
thank
pleasure
you
to meet you.
so much. Pleasure
absolutely.
to have a wonderful holidays.
Okay, you too.
You too. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Mhm.